order now all of a sudden I went all the way down to 169 pages. Let me get all the way to the top if possible. Quicker than what I'm doing here. All right, anyway, so I was doing a search, and on the search, I had come across this book, and it's called The Jesuit Order as a Synagogue of Jews. And myself, I honestly believe the Lord is impressing upon me and a few others that I'm finding that the crypto Jews are the Pharisaical Jews, the Sadducees. They are real Jews, but they are those come from the line of those that absolutely hated Jesus Christ and wanted him destroyed. So, anyway, I believe that they are working with the Roman Catholic Church. On top of that, I do believe that the popes and the Jesuits are also of the Jewish bloodline. So, I wanted to read the introduction to see if we would be interested in reading this book. If so, I could either print it out because it is a PDF. I'm assuming the author is actually still alive. I'm not positive on that. I really can't go into detail because I do not know. I just found it today. So, introduction. In an email regarding to my lecture on the Jesuits of Jewish origin at the Jesuit Risi Institute of Mekku in November 2007, a Jesuit told me briefly the story of his Jewish lineage. While his other Seraphitic ancestors went to Istanbul, Baghdad, Tehran, and through the Silk Road up to Shanghai, where they remain Jewish until today. Both his grandparents were descendants of Jews who settled in Palermo and Tarberia, Sicily, where they converted to Catholicism in order to survive. In the baptismal registers, which are still extant, they are described as usurers. Usurers, I think it's like bankers. Yet they kept practicing Judaism secretly from Friday evening through Saturday evening. His grandfather would hide the image of baby Jesus from a large frame picture of St. Anthony that he kept in his home. It was, in fact, a wind up music box. On Fridays, he would wind up the mechanism and push a button so that Jesus would disappear out of St. Anthony's arms, hidden in the upper frame of the picture. On Saturdays, he then would push the button again so that Jesus would come back out from hiding into St. Anthony's arms. As eldest son in his family, my correspondent was told this story by his father, who passed away in 1979, who also had asked him to eat only kosher food. None of his siblings were required to do so. They, in fact, hid their origins since they were a devout, practicing Catholic family. Had the Jesuits who wrote me this email asked to enter the Jesuit order between 1593 and 1608, his Jewish ancestry would have constituted a legal impediment to his admission, just because his character would have been allegedly compromised by his impure blood, no matter how distant his Jewish ancestors were. Had he asked to become a Jesuit between 1608 and 1946, his background would have been reviewed up to the fifth generation, and the story of his heterodox parental grandfather could, therefore, have been cited as a reason to prevent him from entering the order. However, had he been a professed Jesuit between 1540 and 1593, no law would have prevented him from following his vocation, even though not every conferor would have supported it. This book tells the story of the evolution of the discriminatory concept of purity of blood, its complex nature, its magnitude in the early society of Jesus, the Jesuits, and the role Christians of Jewish ancestry played in the order. Purity of blood was an obsessive concern that originated in mid-15th century Spain, based on the biased belief that the unfaithfulness of the decide Jews not only had endured in those who converted to Catholicism, but also had been transmitted by blood to their descendants, regardless of their sincerity in professing the Christian faith. Consequently, the old Christians of pure blood considered new Christians impure and morally inadequate to be active members of their communities. As Yosef Hayim Yerushalmi put it eloquently, the traditional mistrust of the Jew as outsider now gave way to an even more alarming fear of the converso as insider. In the process of nation state building in the early modern period, which was characterized by the national self definition based on purity of lineage, the converso and Jewish elements, as figuratively epitomized in Shakespeare's unmiscegenated Belmont, became a particular dangerous threat. Arguably, the high number of Jews who converted to Christianity as a result of the pogroms in the 14th and 15th century as a result of the royal edict of 1492 constituted much greater hindrance to the monarch's vision of Catholic national identity than they had during the Visigothic rule in Spain prior to the Muslim invasion of the Iberian Peninsula in 711. And then it has got a whole bunch of footnotes here, brothers and sisters, a lot of footnotes. Like there are different terms to designate this group: new Christians, neophytes, Marranos, confessos. That's all Latin to me. I prefer to use conversos, for it does not carry any pejorative connotation. It is employed in contemporary historiography, and additionally it points out the Iberian origin of the group. So this is a whole bunch of footnotes on what he used, I should say, to write the book. All right, let me continue. The first part of the title of the present book, The Jesuit Order as a Synagogue of Jews, reflects the genealogy identification of the converted Jews and their descendants, no matter how distant, with their allegedly infidel ancestors. It was characteristic not only of the renowned Talmudic authorities and of the late medieval and early modern Christian authors whom we shall analyze throughout this book, but also of some contemporary historians. Alfred Sickroff described this trend as the ulcer of the Spanish existence. It is telling that, for instance, the titles of both the anti-converso legislation at the San Antonio de Siguanza College, Statutum contra, I can't say all these words. These are just crazy words. I'm sorry. In 1497, and the major contemporary work on Spanish conversos by Julio Caro Barra, Madrid. Oh my goodness. I can't speak Latin. I can't speak Spanish. I can't speak Greek. In 1961, reflect the identification of conversos with Jews. Even though after the expulsion of 1492, there were officially no Jews in Spain, as there were no Jews in Portugal after their expulsion in 1497. Caro Barja, in fact, identified three different sources of the anti-Jewish bias: the economic usury, the psychological intelligence and arrogance, and the physical body features and ungratefulness. A mixture of prejudices based on these features, the conversos allegedly inherited by blood, pervades the entire anti-converso literature, starting with the first purity of blood legislation, 1449, passed by the mayor of the city of Toledo in Castile, Pero de Sarmiento, in 1547, promulgated by the Archbishop of Toledo, Juan Martinez. I should know this word, but I don't. Guijarro. I cannot pronounce it. between 1477 and 1557, better known as Cilicio, and to Bishop Diego de Simancas Defenso, I can't say any of those words, in 1573. Like the gentle, but not Gentile, daughter of Shylock, Jessica in Shakespeare's The Merchant of Venice, in spite of canonical assurance of the regeneration through baptism, the converso was still considered a Jew in the eyes of Spanish Old Christians, and as such, he or she was constantly responsible for the faults of his or her Jewish ancestors. How insane. Two major ecclesiastical intellectuals of 15th century Spain adamantly challenged in their works the discriminatory portrayal of the converso. Alonso de Santa Maria de Cartagena in 1384 to 1456 in the Defensatorium something Christian in defense of Christian unity. That's what it means. In 1449 to 50, and Alonso or Epistle, 1469, and the Lumen and Revelationum Genitum et Gloria Piblis de Israel de, I can't pronounce any of these, forgive me, in 1450 to 66. Light for the revelation of Gentiles and glory to the people of God, Israel, concerning the unity of faith and agreeable and peaceable equality of the faithful. That's it in English. Although Gretchen Starr-Lebeau has pointed out in her important book on the religious history of Guadalupe in Extra Montera that Fray Alonso de Orzapus work represents one of the period's most important and carefully reasoned theological statements on the status of conversos in Christendom. Cartagena's work seems to have exercised even more influence in offering a distinctive Jewish converso satirology. This is why we shall spotlight his Defensatorum in Chapter 1, without failing to note, however, its theological resemblance to the Lumen in their comprehensive template of arguments. Both Defensatorum and Lumen would become inspirational to many future efforts to defend the threatened status of conversos, including Jesuit conversos, as we shall see in the last chapter. Analyzing Cartagena's and Orpasa's works add significance to the understanding of the following chapters of this book for two reasons. First, Juan Alfonso de Polanco, 1517 to 76, one of the most influential converso Jesuits, descended from the converso Maluenda clan of Burgos, which was allied with the newly converted Santa Maria family through the marriage of Alonso de Cartagena's parental aunt, Maria Nuns, 1423, to Juan Garcia de Melundo II, the Jesuit jurist Garcia Giron de Alarcon, 1534 to 97, whose pro-converso treatise we shall examine below, belong to the same order as Orpeso, the Geronomites, before joining the Society of Jesus. The Geronomites were renowned for their openness to converso candidates, and as such represented in Scaroff's view the Spanish pre-Erasmist movement. Erasmus movement. That's going to be Erasmus. I'm thinking Erasmist, Erasmus. Not Aramist movement. It is not unreasonable, therefore, to see connections between the Jeremiah and Jesuit converso traditions, which, to the best of my knowledge, have passed unnoticed by historians, but which deserve to be treated in a separate monograph. Furthermore, the founder of the Jesuits, Ignatius of Loyola, 1491 to 1556, had many contacts with influential Aramists and alumbrados, brados, alumbrados during his studies at Alcalá de Henares, as we shall see in chapter 2. Indeed, his positive approach to conversos and Jews predates the foundation of the Society of Jesus in 1540. Despite the assertion of many experts to the contrary, his openness towards conversos may have been motivated by the financial support that he had sought from their network in Spain and in the Spanish Netherlands before founding the society, and that he would continue to seek as the superior general of the Jesuits. In spite of this down-to-earth concern, Loyola undoubtedly was, as Henry Kaman powerfully put it, a deep and sincere spiritual Semite. So they're saying he was Jew, it sounds like. The foundation of the Jesuits coincided with, for better or for worse, with the rise of the Spanish anti-converso hysteria that reached its peak in 1547, when the most authoritative expression of the purity of blood legislation, El Esteto de something, was issued by the Inquisitor General of Spain and the Archbishop of Toledo, Silecio. Even though Pope Paul IV and Silecio's former pupil, King Philip II, ratified the Archbishop's statutes in 1555 and 1556, respectively, in spite of the latter's earlier opposition to it. The authority and impetuous character of Silecio did not deter Ignatius of Loyola and his converso successor, Diego Lainez, 1512 to 65. Encouraged by their close converso collaborators, they vigorously opposed the Inquisitor's attempt to preclude conversos from joining the Jesuits. They also had to counter the Jesuit provincial superior for Spain and Loyola's relative, Antonio Arras, 1515 to 73, who abetted by his penitent, the Prince of Eboli, Rue Gomez de Silva, 1516 to 73, made himself the Jesuit harbinger of the Iberian policy of Perusa de Sangre. In a letter addressed to the Jesuit Francisco de Villanueva in 1509 to 1507, Loyola straightforwardly wrote that in no way would the Jesuit constitutions accept the policy of the Archbishop, who, according to Loyola, should take care of his own business rather than interfering with the internal issues of the society. The problem was that the flourishing college at Alcalá de Henares, which was inaugurated by the Jesuit Villanueva in 1546, had become a mine of Jesuit converso vocations, was located within Silecio diocesan jurisdiction. In this delicate affair, Loyola was aided by his plenipotentiary emissary, Geronimo Nadal Mori, 1507 to 80, who visited the Inquisitor in February 1554 in communion with Loyola. Nadal insisted that the Jesuit constitutions did not discriminate between candidates of the society on the basis of lineage. Nadal, therefore, during his visit to Iberia, admitted a handful of converso candidates in a heated debate over the admission of one of them, Luis Diego de Santander, 1527 to 99. Nadal frankly and proudly replied, "We, Jesuits, take pleasure in admitting those of Jewish ancestry." The heated polemics over Silecio's legislation were still echoed 3 decades later in Diego de Simanac's Defenso Tolatini Statiae Apostolica Sapi Let's see. Oh, well, good. It's in English right here. The defense of the Toledan statue, which was often confirmed by the Apostolic See for those who were born of good and uncontaminated lineage, 1573. Despite the fact that the Inquisition in 1572 prohibited further discussion of the purity of blood issue, this text, whose publication date coincides with the Jesuit Third General Congregation, in which the anti and pro converso lobbies collided, is of special concern here, not only because, in contrast to the early Jesuit leadership, it defended Silicio status, but also because Synagogue's tract may have been utilized by some Jesuits to promote similar anti-converso legislation. How did I just looked away and then I lost my spot. Forgive me. Statutes utilized legislation and the Society of Jesus during the decade of fervent discriminatory propaganda that preceded General Congregation 5 in 1593. Indeed, a Jesuit from Toledo copied many excerpts from Samanica's book in 1591. They are preserved in the Jesuit archives of Rome, but until now have remained unnoticed because a Jesuit archivist inserted the manuscript of Defenso Stati Toletani, whose genre he did not recognize, into a folder containing a documents statia related to the foundation of the Jesuit College at Toledo. These excerpts are analyzed in Chapter 1 for the first time in the context of earlier anti-converso texts. They suggest the genealogy of modern racism from Sarmiento to Silicio to Synagogue to anti-converso Jesuit legislation, and they indicate the correlation between early modern institutional Catholicism and the new racism developing in Spain and spreading outwards. In this perspective, the anti-discrimination policy of the early Jesuit leadership constituted an act of bold and tenacious resistance to the early modern Iberian Zeitgeist. That's Zeitgeist. I think that's a man, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not positive, but I think Luther knew him. I could be wrong, though. As a result, the minority of Jesuits of Jewish ancestry, socially and psychologically bonded one to another or disassociated from one another, shaped the history of the early Society of Jesus. They held the highest administrative offices, defined the society's institutional development and spirituality, revised Loyola's historiography by assigning it an inflated anti-protestant character, filled the ranks of linguistically erudite missionaries in Asia and the Americas, authoritatively represented the society at the Council of Trent, significantly contributed to the transformation of the society into the first teaching order and to the placement of Greco-Roman culture in the center of the Jesuit school curriculum, influenced by the Domitians from the school of Salamanca. Oh, yeah, is a movement. I didn't know that, Allie. Was it a man from, Martin Luther's day or no? I don't know. Okay, let me see. Boldly offered a new epistemology frame to casuistry as a transition from medieval Tutorism to modern probabilism. Oh, okay, don't think so. Okay. Developed a new discipline of moral theology and staffed the papal penitentiary office at St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. Some came from families who generously supported the work of the society and the foundation of a number of Jesuit colleges. Others enthusiastically engaged in many other extraordinary literary, diplomatic, and scientific endeavors. Especially popular among them were different missions dealing with heretics and schismatics. By their sanctity and learning, they rendered the society illustrious. As the Jesuit Garcia Giron de Elcron put it, on a much larger scale than the historian Marcel Battalion has intuitively suggested. These contributions by Jesuits of Jewish ancestry helped to shape the early modern Catholicism by complementing the work of their distinguished Iberian converso fellows such as Hernando de Talavera, 1428 to 1507, Joan Louis Vives, 1492 to 1540. And hold on. General, a close-knit anti-converso party gained within the society, as indicated by the archival material on the Italo-Portuguese sabotage of the election of Juan Alfonso de Polanco. This sounds like mafia. I'm sorry. Oh, I did not know that, Allie. I did not know that. There's a lot of things I did not know. A lot of things. So really, let's see. But they combine all the religions in the Zetagist, saying every religion has the Son and Mary, making all religions the same. That is insane. Just insane. But Satan started it out right from the beginning. I mean, he was right there in the garden when it was prophesied that the woman's seed was going to be energy with his seed. So he knew, wait a minute, a woman don't have a seed. Satan's not stupid. So we knew a virgin was going to come about having a child, a male child, and he had to somehow pervert that so people would be confused. And he did a very good job. All right, let's see. Upon election as Vicar General, the converso Polanco was the most prominent figure in the Society of Jesus. He had been a senior administrator in the General Cura in Rome since his appointment by Loyola in 1547 as society's secretary. Because the previous two Vicar General, Lantines and Borgia, which is, oh, that just slapped me in the face. Borgia, Francis is a Borgia, isn't he? Isn't that what it's called, Allie? Isn't he a Borgia? You know, the one guy that was the model, let's say, for Da Vinci, that painted this picture that everyone says is Jesus, which is not, but he's a Borgia, right? He's a Borgia. Yes. Isn't that insane? Oh, hold on. Hold on. I got this all mixed up. Boy, I'll tell you what, the enemy don't want us reading this. Hold on. All right, here we go. I got so excited I lost my place. Here we go. All right, Borgia, yes. All right, successor during the Third General Congregation, 1573, which we shall analyze in Chapter 3. Upon election as Vicar General, the converso Polanco was the most prominent figure in the Society of Jesus. He had been a senior administrator in the General Cura in Rome since his appointment by Loyola in 1547 as society secretary. Because the previous two vicars, General Lantz and Borgia, had been elected superior general at the subsequent general congregation, Polanco was considered the most probable candidate for this highest post in the society. After all, to the dismay of the Italian Benedetto Palamio, 1523 to 98, and the Portuguese, the Spanish electors dominated the congregation. They governed all but one Italian province, and the province of Portugal also was in their hands. Contributors to the Mercurian Project have recently discussed this anti-Polanco campaign more critically. Francisco de Borgia Medina, S.J., pointed out that even though the Italian Benedetto Palamio denied his unpublished autobiography, the charge that he was part of the Portuguese intrigue during the congregation. His anti-Spanish tendencies were well known. Medina further pointed out that the veiled attacks against Juan Alonso de Polanco for his Judeo-Christian ancestors were directed in reality against the Spanish nation. Moreover, John Padberg, I believe it's saying Society of Jesus is saying SJ, argued that Ptolemy pressed Antonio Passavino to do battle for his homeland Italy by voting against a Spaniard. Finally, Mario Foy's SJ suggested that a distinction must be made between the anti-Spanish motivation of Palmio and other Italians, and the anti-conservo opposition of the Portuguese group. As we shall see, however, the archival material that we examine in this book reveals that the real intention of both Palmio and the Portuguese was to impede the election of Polanco or any other converso candidate. Spanish was a euphemism for Jew conservo. What? Really? Or any other conservo candidate. Spanish, and it's in quotes, was a euphemism for Jew converso. And the anti-Spanish campaign during the Third General Congregation was thus merely a camouflage for the Italio-Portuguese anti-conservo conspiracy. In spite of the death of the royal minister, Rui Gomez de Silva and his protege, Aras, in 1573, the anti-conservo lobby found support in the newly elected Superior General Edvard Mercurian, 1514 to 80, who for the very first years of his office cleansed the house. He removed from Rome and possibly from Italy or even Europe almost all Spanish Jesuits, especially those who were accused in Polimo's memorial of being part of the converso lobby. Ironically, Mercurian's segregation policy created new opportunities for some converso or pro-converso Jesuits who had occupied high-ranking positions in their Jesuit administration to reinvent themselves as prolific writers. Three clear examples are Polanco, who spent the last years of his life composing the first multi-volume chronicle of the society; Nadel, who produced his monumental Evangelical Historiae Images with 153 superb engravings by Bernardino Passeri, 1590, Martin de Vos, 1532 to 1603, the brothers Maryks and others, and especially Pedro de Ribadeneira, 1525 to 1611, who between 1574 and 1611 had composed an impressive number of writings on history, historiography, asceticism, Richardson, and politics, many of which were multi-edited and translated. Well, I'm not going to be able to finish this introduction because these dogs are not good. Yes, Sister Caesar Borgia. That's right. That's exactly right, Ellie. So anyway, I'm going to have to end this here. Maybe we'll pick up in the introduction later in my room. Bless you all. I hope you can hear me. They get so excited when people come over. So keep your eyes on Jesus, brothers and sisters. Your nose in the book, which is the Word of God. And embed the Word of God upon the tablets of your hearts, so you and I will not sin against God or be deceived. I am so sorry for those dogs.